Why would God place the destiny of his holy people into the hands of a pagan? Why was it not a devout Jewish king, but an emperor from Iran, a foreign nation of fire worshippers? Have we perhaps misunderstood the way God moves through history? It was all part of a plan harboring a powerful message sent by God. These secrets lie within an ancient testament. This truth will completely transform the way each of us thinks about faith. In 586 BC, the Babylonian sky at dusk did not carry the dreamy purple hues of the Mediterranean. Instead, it glowed a murky, visceral red, like molten blood. The harsh sunlight beat down upon the city walls. Seen from above, Babylon appeared as a massive labyrinth, a monster of stone and pure gold slumbering beside the gentle Euphrates River. But for those who had just been dragged here in chains, that splendor was nothing more than a cruel, gilded cage. Beneath the willows casting shadows over the Euphrates, a group of Jews sat with bowed heads. They were gaunt, their clothes reduced to mere rags caked with the dust of a 1,000-mile journey from a devastated Jerusalem. The dry, cold clinking of iron chains whenever someone moved cut through the rhythmic murmur of the water. Jeremiah, a young man with eyes sunken from many sleepless nights, stared fixedly at the muddy current. In his mind, the horrific images of a month ago remained vivid. Violent flames swallowing the walls of Jerusalem, the screams of women and children mingling with the crash of the temple, the place where they believed God dwelt forever. Where is God? The question pricked Jeremiah's heart like a needle. He looked toward the elders of the clan. They did not cry. Their tears seemed to have run dry on the exile's path strewn with corpses. They simply sat there gazing west toward a homeland that was now nothing but a heap of ash. A middle-aged man, his hands still bearing charred scars from trying to save a scroll of the law from the fire, tremblingly lifted his small clairsac harp. But instead of plucking a hymn as usual, he silently hung it upon a drooping willow branch. "Why do you not play, Father?" Jeremiah asked, his voice hoarse. The father looked at him, his eyes vacant. "How can we sing the song of Yahweh in a foreign land? How can we praise him when he has allowed the Babylonians to trample the sanctuary and let King Nebuchadnezzar use the holy vessels of the temple as wine goblets?" The silence that enveloped them was more terrifying than the lashes of the Babylonian guards. In the distance, the blare of trumpets hailing the king echoed from Nebuchadnezzar's palace. The Babylonians were celebrating their victory. They mocked the Jewish prisoners. "Come on, sing us one of the songs of Zion." For the exiles, Babylon was not just imprisoning their bodies. It was silently destroying their souls. With each passing day, they saw their children begin to babble Babylonian words, watching them gaze in awe at the greatness of the god Marduk, the deity the Babylonians praised as the one who defeated the God of Israel. The fear of being forgotten, the fear of dissolving into the current of this great empire was greater than the fear of death itself. Jeremiah stood up and approached an elder sitting quietly in a corner. This was Eli, the only one in the group of exiles who maintained a strange, extraordinary calm amidst the storm. "Sir," Jeremiah choked out, "has God truly abandoned us? He has been silent for 70 years, since the prophets first warned us. And now, when we have lost everything, he remains silent. Is the God of the Babylonians truly stronger?" Eli raised his clouded but keen eyes to look at the young man. He pointed toward the distant horizon where the Zagros mountains of Persia, modern-day Iran, were faintly appearing in the early mist. "My son, God is not silent. He is writing, but he does not write with ink on paper. He writes with empires and kings. Do you see this great Euphrates River? It can drown anyone, but it too can be drained dry if the Most High wills it." He lowered his voice filled with mystery. God is preparing a way, not through a weak Jewish army, but through a lion from the east. a pagan whose name neither you nor I have ever heard, yet his name has sat within an ancient scroll for 100 years. Jeremiah shivered. A sudden cold wind blew down from the Iranian plateau, rustling the willow branches and the hanging harps. The wind whistling through the harp strings created a mournful sound like an answer from the void. Babylon remained steeped in wine lust and ultimate arrogance. King Nebuchadnezzar believed his dynasty would last forever. But on the other side of the mountains, destiny had begun to move. While the Jews wept for a lost past, God had begun to sow the seeds of a future they could not imagine. A child named Cyrus was about to step onto the stage of history, carrying the code to liberate the people sitting and weeping by this river. In the darkness of despair, a faint light of prophecy had begun to flicker. Who was this pagan, and why would God choose someone who did not know him to carry out the most sacred mission? Who was this man truly? A silent night in Jerusalem where a prophet tremblingly records the name of the stranger who will change the world? While the clinking chains of the exiles would echo in the future by the Euphrates, the timeline shifts back to a bitter winter night in Jerusalem around 700 BC. The holy city had not yet been burned. Solomon's temple still stood tall, its bronze pillars shimmering under the moonlight. But in the shadows of the stone corridors, an invisible unease loomed. In a small room deep within the royal quarters, the space was filled with the scent of old parchment and the pungent aroma of ink made from soot and resin. The prophet Isaiah sat motionless before a sprawling goatskin scroll. The flickering candlelight from a clay oil lamp danced across his weathered face, deepening the wrinkles of a man who had carried the burden of heavenly visions his entire life. Suddenly, the space around Isaiah seemed to freeze. The wind whistling through the door cracks vanished, replaced by a massive surge of power that flooded the room, making his chest tighten. In a state of trance, Isaiah no longer saw the 4 stone walls. Before his eyes, a distant land appeared. It was not the arid desert of Judea, but snow-capped mountain ranges and the vast wind-swept steppes of what is now the Iranian plateau. Amidst that grandeur, a voice rang out like solemn thunder, piercing his soul. It was not a gentle word of comfort, but a command that would shift the heavens and the earth. God began to dictate a name. Isaiah's hand trembled. He dipped his quill into the inkwell. Black drops fell onto the parchment, like drops of history's blood. He wrote down each Hebrew character, K-O-R-E-S-H, Cyrus. Isaiah paused. His mind reeled. Who was Cyrus in the records of the kings of Israel, Judah, or even the mighty empires like Assyria? At that time, there was no such name. Persia then was merely a land of obscure shepherd tribes, not even marked on the world's map of power. Why would God call the name of someone who did not belong to the chosen people? Someone who had not even been formed in his mother's womb? Isaiah continued to write the words flowing like a waterfall, who says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure, whose right hand I have held to subdue nations before him, to open before him the double doors." Isaiah 44-28, 45:1. The most mysterious and shocking part of this vision was the title God bestowed upon Cyrus, "My Anointed Messiah." This was a title strictly reserved for Jewish kings or the future Savior. To apply it to a pagan king, a man who worshipped other gods on the Iranian plateau, was unbelievable to any Jew. Lord, Isaiah whispered with bated breath, "Why him, a man who does not know you, a distant stranger?" The answer echoed in his spirit, cold and majestic, "For Jacob, my servant's sake. I have even called you by your name. I have named you, though you have not known me. I am Yahweh, and there is no other. There is no God besides me." At that moment, a young student tasked with rolling up the manuscript entered the room. Seeing his master dazed and drenched in sweat, he asked anxiously, "Master, have you just received an oracle regarding the fall of Babylon?" Isaiah pointed to the name Cyrus on the wet parchment. The student frowned, spelling it out, then exclaimed, "Cyrus, a strange name. Where is he from? Which lineage of King David does he belong to?" Isaiah shook his head, his gaze piercing through the mists of time. "He belongs to no lineage. He comes from the east, from the land of the rising sun. He does not know our God, yet God has taken him by the hand. He will be the iron rod to break the yoke of our people 150 years from now." The student was stunned. 150 years, Master, by then, we will all have returned to the dust. Why would he reveal this right now? "So that the world may know," Isaiah replied, his voice becoming steely, "that God has no borders. He is not locked within the temple of Jerusalem. He sovereignly rules over every throne, even those not yet built. He chooses the pagan to shame the conceited. He uses Iran to save Israel." As the final lines of chapter 45 were completed, Isaiah rolled up the scroll. He used hot wax to seal it with his signet. He knew this scroll would endure a perilous journey. It would be kept in the treasuries of the kings of Judah, then forgotten under the dust of wars until Babylon captured Jerusalem and carried all those treasures north. The prophecy of Cyrus was like a spiritual time bomb, lying silent in the darkness of Babylonian libraries for over a century, waiting for the exact moment the man of that name appeared to activate the flow of history. Darkness enveloped the room, but the name Cyrus was permanently etched into destiny. Somewhere far away on the harsh Iranian plateau, the wheels of time began to turn faster. The oracles began to find their way to becoming reality through a child about to be born, with a dream of a vine covering the whole world. The word was spoken, the seal was set. But how could a child ordered to be killed by his own grandfather at birth survive to become a great emperor, step into the mystical palace of Ecbatana, to witness the thrilling birth of Cyrus? While the scroll of the prophet Isaiah lay quietly in the archives of Jerusalem, covered by the dust of time in the Far East on the wind-swept Iranian plateau, the wheels of destiny began to turn with a nightmare. It was a gloomy night in the city of Ecbatana, the capital of the mighty Median Empire, the predecessor of the land of Iran. King Astyages, the lord of the highlands, jolted awake in the middle of the night, sweat pouring from his brow. In his dream, he had seen a bizarre vision. From the womb of his daughter, Princess Mandane, grew a giant vine. That vine stretched out lush green branches covering the entire Middle East, overshadowing his throne and swallowing all of Asia into its shade. The next morning, the court magi masters of dream interpretation and astrology knelt tremblingly at the king's feet. Their decoding was like a death sentence for the dynasty. "Your Majesty, the child that Princess Mandane carries will overthrow your throne. He will be the king of kings, and the kingdom of the Medes will vanish beneath his feet." Jealousy and the fear of losing power turned the royal grandfather into a murderer. As soon as the child was born, a baby boy, with eyes as bright as the stars, Astyages ordered his trusted general Harpagus, "Take this child away, kill him, and hide him in a place where no one can find him." General Harpagus took the child in a solid gold cradle, but as he looked upon the boy's innocent face, the hands of the undefeated warrior suddenly trembled. He could not bring himself to slaughter an innocent being carrying royal blood. However, the king's command was law. Torn between compassion and fear, Harpagus made a thrilling decision. He took the child to the remote, snowy Zagros mountains and handed him to a shepherd named Mithridates. Destiny had arranged a miraculous coincidence. The shepherd's wife had just given birth to a stillborn child. "Take this dead child, dress him in the royal garments, and present him to the king," Harpagus ordered. "As for this child, raise him as your own." And so, in a crude mud hut amidst flocks of sheep and the limestone ridges of Iran, the future emperor of the world, Cyrus, began his life. Instead of silks and fine fabrics, he wore sheepskin. Instead of the flatteries of the court, he heard the wind whistling through mountain crevices and the calls of the flock. Living amidst the harsh nature of the Iranian plateau, Cyrus grew up with resilient health and a broad soul. He learned to shoot a bow, to ride a horse, and most importantly, for the ancient Persians to speak the truth. The Bible in the book of Isaiah calls him my shepherd. How thrilling it is that destiny placed a prince into the role of an actual shepherd so that he might understand the pain of the lowly and so that his heart would not be tainted by the arrogance of the court. God used these hidden years to forge a king of winning people's hearts, one who later would not use iron chains to rule but tolerance to conquer. The mystery of destiny cannot be hidden forever. When Cyrus was 10 years old during a game with his fellow shepherd boys, he was elected king. With an innate air of majesty, Cyrus ordered the punishment of a boy who was the son of a Median nobleman for the crime of disobedience. The incident caused an uproar that reached the ears of King Astyages. When Cyrus was dragged before the throne, the old king looked at the shepherd boy and was stunned. Those eyes, that brow Gyuki chat, that aura could not belong to a commoner. The truth was exposed. Harpagus was brutally punished for his deception, but towards Cyrus king, Astyages felt a belated regret. Instead of killing his grandson a second time, the king sent him back to the distant land of Persia to reunite with his biological parents, King Cambyses I. Cyrus left the palace of Ecbatana, but he carried with him a longing for freedom. He understood that he was born not to be a slave to the Medes, but to fulfill the vision of the vine covering Asia. As Cyrus stood on a high mountain peak looking west, the Babylonian Empire was still standing, proud and arrogant, unaware that the castaway child of the Iranian plateau was beginning to grow strong. The vine had taken root in the rocky soil, and soon its branches would reach all the way to Jerusalem to rescue the people of the Most High. Returning to the land of Persia. Persis, a small, impoverished, and harsh province of the Median Empire. Cyrus was no longer an innocent shepherd boy, nor was he a frail prince of the court. 10 years of living amidst the wilderness of the Zagros Mountains had forged a man with a will of cold steel and a heart as vast as the Iranian steppes. At that time, the Persians, the ancestors of modern Iranians, were considered second-class citizens, forced to serve and pay heavy tribute to King Astyages of Media. They lived, simply worshipped the truth, and mastered the skills of horsemanship and archery from the moment they could walk. In these hardy people, Cyrus saw a massive source of suppressed strength. He understood that to liberate the Jewish people in far-off Babylon, according to the divine will, he first had to liberate his own people. The most thrilling event marking Cyrus's rise was the way he won over the hearts of his troops through a brilliantly intellectual test. One scorching morning on the Persian plateau, Cyrus gathered all the tribes and issued a peculiar command: "Each of you bring a sickle. Today, we must clear this entire field of briars and thorns before sunset." Throughout the long day, thousands of Persian men sweated their skin bloodied by scratching thorns, yet they worked on doggedly out of respect for their young leader. By evening, the desolate field lay clean. Cyrus told them to go rest and promised a different task for the following day. The next morning, instead of sickles and thorns, Cyrus laid out a magnificent banquet with roasted lamb, fragrant wine, and hot bread. He told them, "Today you have only to eat, drink, and enjoy yourselves." As the feast reached its peak, Cyrus stood up, his voice echoing across the steppe. "O Persian warriors, yesterday was your life under the Median yoke, full of thorns and toil. Today is the life I bring to you, if you dare to stand with me. Do you choose the thorns, or do you choose the banquet?" A roar of cheers erupted across the valleys of Iran. That was the moment the Persian lion officially awakened. Cyrus did not use power to coerce. He used empathy to connect. This was the first seed of the winning hearts strategy, using benevolence to conquer the human spirit, a virtue that God had foreseen and chosen him for long ago. In 550 BC, King Astyages led a massive Median army south to punish his rebellious grandson. The odds seemed insurmountable. Media was an ancient empire armed to the teeth, while Persia was merely a collection of rising tribes. But this was when the mystical arrangement of God revealed itself. The general commanding the Median vanguard was none other than Harpagus, the man who had spared Cyrus's life years before. The lingering resentment from the cruel punishment Astyages had previously inflicted on him, combined with his admiration for Cyrus's character, led Harpagus to make a decision that changed history. The moment the two armies faced off, Harpagus lowered his weapons and led the entire Median force to defect to Cyrus. Instead of slaughtering the defeated according to ancient custom, Cyrus did something shocking. He embraced the Median warriors, declared them brothers, and kept his grandfather, King Astyages, by his side to be cared for until the end of his life. He did not destroy Media. He integrated them into Persia to create a unified Iranian empire, mightier than anything the world had ever seen. In the land of Pasargadae in present-day Fars province, Iran, Cyrus began building his first capital. Archaeological remains to this day reveal a unique architectural style, slender stone columns, and lush green gardens irrigated by a genius system of water channels. On the stone walls, simple cuneiform inscriptions were found, "I am Cyrus, king of the Achaemenid dynasty." There were no threats, no carvings of the torture of enemies commonly seen in other empires. Cyrus was building an empire based on respect and national harmony, a solid foundation from which he could advance west, where Babylon sat trembling under the weight of its own arrogance. Cyrus stood on the Iranian plateau looking toward the dark clouds of Mesopotamia. The Persian lion was ready. The shackles of the people of Israel were about to be broken, not by hatred but by a king who had learned how to love even his enemies. Once Iran became a unified force under Cyrus, the next objective was the city of gold, Babylon. But Babylon had walls that touched the sky and a river for protection. How would a mystical hand appear to fling those gates wide open? While the hoofbeats of the Persian-Iranian army began to shake the borderlands, an atmosphere of insane self-complacency enveloped the inner city of Babylon. Babylon, the capital of luxury, the city of towering walls and impenetrable bronze gates, believed itself to be eternal. King Belshazzar, the arrogant prince-regent, decided to hold a great feast to defy destiny and mock the enemy lurking outside. That night, the Babylonian palace was ablaze with the light of thousands of torches dipped in scented oil. The heavy scent of wine mingled with the smell of rare frankincense from the east. Upon mother-of-pearl inlaid couches, thousands of lords, concubines, and sycophants indulged in frenzied dances. In the midst of his intoxication, Belshazzar, who carried the blood of the conqueror Nebuchadnezzar, made a brutal decision to assert his ultimate authority over the gods. He commanded, "Bring the holy vessels of gold and silver that my father plundered from the temple in Jerusalem. We shall use them to drink to the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone of Babylon." The holy cups and the vessels for sacrificial oil, meant only for Jewish priests to offer to God, were now seized by hands stained with meat and wine. Boisterous laughter and the sacrilegious clinking of cups rang through the sanctuary. They did not know that at the very moment their pride reached its zenith, God's patience had run dry. Suddenly, the music cut out. A cold draft swept through the sealed room, making the candles flicker. Every eye turned toward the white plastered wall glowing near the royal lampstand. Out of thin air, human fingers appeared, a bodiless hand hovering and glowing like burning embers. The hand moved slowly but with finality, writing strange characters on the wall in a mysterious language. The screech of the fingers against the plaster sounded like a sword sharpening on stone, making the listener's marrow shiver. King Belshazzar, who had just been boasting, turned as pale as a ghost. The Bible describes a pathetic image. The king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened and his knees knocked against each other. All the best magicians and sorcerers of Babylon were summoned, but they were struck dumb. Human wisdom was utterly powerless before the message of the Most High. Amidst the chaos, the Queen Mother entered and mentioned one man, Daniel, the aged prophet of the Jews, a man who possessed the spirit of the holy gods. Daniel entered the great hall. He looked at the defiled holy cups at the trembling king, and then up at the wall. His voice rang out not with fear, but with the majesty of a judge. Your Majesty, the Most High God, gave the kingdom to your father, but you have not humbled yourself. You have insulted the Lord of heaven by using his holy vessels to worship idols. The entire palace fell silent in horror. The death sentence for an empire had been pronounced in the middle of a party. While Babylon was still reeling from the prophecy outside the city walls, Cyrus and the Persian army were executing a stroke of genius. They did not attack the walls. They attacked the city's lifeblood. Cyrus had ordered his soldiers to dig a massive canal upstream, diverting the Euphrates River into a man-made basin. The water level of the river flowing through Babylon dropped rapidly, eventually reaching only a man's waist. In the darkness, the Persian army quietly waded through the muddy riverbed, heading straight into the heart of the city. Because they were overconfident in the strength of their walls and preoccupied with feasting, the Babylonian guards had left the iron gates along the river open. The Persian army entered without the blast of a trumpet, without a bloody skirmish. They swarmed into the palace just as Daniel's interpretation concluded. That night, Belshazzar was killed. The Babylonian Empire collapsed in a single night. Isaiah's prophecy from 150 years earlier was coming true. The bronze gates had swung wide before Cyrus. God had used a stranger from the east to execute justice. Dawn was coming, and it carried the breath of freedom for those weeping by the river. Babylon had changed masters, but would the new king from Iran truly be the liberator of the prophecy, or would he become a new, more ruthless tyrant? Let us see how Cyrus took over Babylon to the astonishment of the entire world. The dawn of October 12th, 539 BC broke over the Babylonian sky without the billowing smoke of fire or the agonizing screams of a massacre. Instead, a strange silence settled over the streets. As the first rays of sunlight touched the peak of the towering Etemenanki ziggurat, the people of Babylon realized with a shock that their dynasty had changed hands during a single night's sleep. The Persian-Iranian army had flooded into the city through the bone-dry bed of the Euphrates, but they did not act like violent conquerors. There was no burning of palaces, no looting of civilians. Instead, the Iranian warriors stood guard solemnly at intersections, protecting temples and granaries with an iron discipline that stunned the ancient world. A few days after the fateful night of the takeover, Cyrus the Great officially entered Babylon through the vibrant blue Ishtar Gate. But he did not ride in on a wild warhorse with a blood-stained sword. He entered on a simple chariot, his deep eyes characteristic of a man from the Iranian mountains, surveying the world's greatest city with a strange calm and understanding. His first stop was not the treasures of gold and silver in the palace, but the Asagila Temple, the sanctuary of the Babylonian god Marduk. There, Cyrus performed a shocking act. He bowed his head to show respect for the faith of the local people. His winning heart's strategy shone once more. Cyrus understood that iron chains can hold the body of a slave, but respect is what holds the soul of a subject. Instead of forcing the Babylonians to worship the gods of Iran, he declared that he had come to liberate them from the madness of their former kings and to restore their cultural values. In the slums by the river, thousands of Jews held their breath watching every move of the Persian army through the cracks of rotting wooden doors. Fear gripped them. Will this king from the east be more cruel than Nebuchadnezzar? Will he exile us to the cold mountains of Iran? Amidst that silent panic, the prophet Daniel, the man who had interpreted the hand on the wall the night before, stepped out into the street. He saw the young Iranian warriors. Their eyes did not burn with the fire of hatred, but were full of curiosity and respect. Daniel smiled at his people, his voice ringing with conviction. "Fear no more. The Most High has used the hands of this pagan to break our shackles. This is not an invader. This is the shepherd he has chosen." That night in the military camp outside the palace, the Persian generals who were accustomed to seizing spoils of war questioned Cyrus. "Your Majesty, why are we protecting the enemy's temple? Why not make the Babylonians slaves to build our great capital of Pasargadae?" Cyrus looked into the flickering flames, his gaze seemingly piercing through the mountains of Iran toward the future. "Do you wish to rule a city of ruins or a prosperous empire? If we sow fear, we shall reap rebellion. But if we sow mercy, we shall reap eternal loyalty. I did not come here to replace one tyrant with another. I came to establish a new order where men are free in their own faith." This was the moment the divine arrangement revealed itself most clearly. God did not choose a devout Jewish king to save his people, for such a person would have been seen as biased. He chose an Iranian with an all-encompassing governing mindset, a pagan with a righteous heart, to prove that mercy has no religious borders. The news of Babylon's fall, without shedding a drop of blood, spread like the wind across the Middle East. Neighboring kingdoms were shaken. They had never seen an invasion carry the beauty of a liberation. The city gates that were once locked with the iron bars of Babylon had swung wide exactly as Isaiah had prophesied 150 years prior. Cyrus sat in the great library of Babylon, turning the pages of ancient texts recording the exiled nations. He was looking for a specific group of people, those who had kept their monotheistic faith through 70 years of hardship. The secret of history's greatest homecoming sat on the desk of the Iranian king. While Cyrus was learning about the nation of Israel, a sturdy, old Jewish man requested an audience with the emperor. In his hands was an ancient scroll titled Isaiah. How would this encounter between earthly power and heavenly prophecy unfold? In the central library of the royal palace of Babylon, a repository for tens of thousands of manuscripts dating back to ancient Sumer and Akkad, a man sat in stillness. It was Cyrus the Great. He wore no magnificent royal robes, but rather the simple gray cloak of the Iranian highland warriors. Before him stood an elderly Jewish man with hair as white as wool and piercing eyes that held the wisdom of an entire century. This was Daniel. Cyrus looked upon the old man with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He had heard tales of this man, the one who had survived the lion's den, the one who had made the kings of Babylon tremble with his interpretations of dreams. "Are you Daniel?" Cyrus spoke in a deep, warm, yet commanding voice. "I have heard that you worship a God whose power surpasses all the deities of Babylon. Do you claim that the fall of this kingdom was caused by his hand writing upon the wall?" Daniel bowed respectfully, but his voice rang out with steel. "Your Majesty, I am but a humble servant. It is the Most High, the one who holds the breath of all living things, who determines the fate of empires. He spoke of your Majesty long before you uttered your first cry at birth." Cyrus narrowed his eyes slightly, a flicker of a skeptical smile appearing. "What are you saying? How could the God of an exiled nation, a people whose temple has been leveled to the ground, possibly know of me, an Iranian who had never set foot in your lands?" Daniel did not answer immediately. He slowly reached into his sleeve and produced an old, tattered goatskin scroll stained by time. It was the scroll of the prophet Isaiah, carefully preserved through 150 years of fire and war. "Your Majesty, please hear these words written 150 years ago." Daniel began reading in ancient Hebrew and then translating into Aramaic. so Cyrus could clearly understand who says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd," whose right hand I have held to subdue nations before him. I will go before you and give you the treasures of darkness.
Great king.
Cyrus suddenly bolted upright. The emperor's face, usually so composed, lost its color. The details in the scroll were staggering. The name Cyrus called out specifically, and the details about opening the double doors of bronze and breaking the bars of iron matched perfectly with the river-wading strategy he had just executed. Cyrus snatched the scroll, his hands trembling as he touched the ancient characters. A holy fear flooded his soul. He realized that his victory was not merely the result of military genius, nor was it simple luck. An invisible hand had guided him across the mountains of Iran, leading him here to fulfill a divine testament. "Why?" Cyrus whispered, his eyes never leaving the scroll. "Why would he choose me? I do not know him. I worship the sacred fire. I offer sacrifices to Mithra. Why would he call me his anointed?" Daniel stepped closer, his voice
Cyrus,
gentle yet authoritative. "For the sake of his people, your majesty, so that the world may know from the rising of the sun to its setting that there is none besides him. God chose you, an Iranian stranger, to prove that his love has no borders. He chose you to liberate his people because you have the heart of a shepherd who knows mercy for the lowly." Cyrus sat down, falling into a long, profound silence. In that moment, the arrogance of a conqueror vanished completely. He looked out the window toward the distant peaks of Iran, then toward the west, where Jerusalem lay in ruins. The divine arrangement argument was now clearer than ever. God had used an Iranian who did not know him to shame those who arrogantly believed they owned God. He used the political power of a pagan nation to restore the faith of his own people. "I understand,"
But what if
Cyrus said, his voice now carrying a newfound resolve. "I was chosen not to be a tyrant, but to be a restorer. If your God has called my name, I shall answer him with action." This encounter was not just a meeting between two men. It was the joining of the destinies of Iran and Israel. The greatest decree in ancient history began to take shape in the mind of the Iranian king, a decree that would be fired into clay and remembered for eternity. Following this mystical encounter, Cyrus ordered historians and artisans to prepare a document unprecedented in human history, a proclamation of freedom for all peoples. Witness the birth of the Cyrus cylinder in the next chapter. Under the flickering torches of the royal stone-carving workshop in Babylon, a solemn atmosphere prevailed. The scent of damp clay mingled with the aroma of frankincense from the Iranian highlands, drifting through the room. Here, Persian scholars and Babylonian priests surrounded a barrel-shaped clay cylinder, about 22 centimeters long. This was not merely an archaeological artifact. It was the heart of a new empire where cuneiform script was being etched to change the destiny of tens of thousands. Cyrus the Great stood there, his deep eyes observing every stroke. He did not ask his historians to praise massacres or count the number of severed heads as the Assyrian or Babylonian kings before him had done. He was asking them to write about freedom. The clay cylinder, which history would later call the Cyrus cylinder, began with humble yet powerful words. Cyrus declared that he entered Babylon not as an invader, but as the one chosen by the divine to establish justice. But the most thrilling part, the thing that stunned the entire ancient world, was the text located in the middle of the cylinder. "I gathered all their former inhabitants and returned to them their habitations. I allowed them to worship their gods freely and without threat." The winning hearts strategy of the ancient Iranians was officially documented. Cyrus understood that an empire is only truly great when its people feel protected in their own faith. He did not need iron chains to keep the Jews or other ethnicities in place. He used gratitude to bind their hearts to the Persian throne. When copies of this decree were carried by Persian horse messengers to the Jewish concentration camps along the Euphrates, a seismic shift in faith erupted. Are we going home? The murmur rose like the waves of the sea. An elderly Jewish man, his hands trembling as he held a copy of the decree, wept openly over the cuneiform lines. 70 years of exile, 70 years of being regarded as slaves, and now they were being invited home by the emperor of a foreign land like Iran. But Cyrus did more than just grant them freedom. He performed an act unprecedented in history. He ordered the Babylonian treasuries opened to retrieve all 5,400 gold and silver items from the Temple of Jerusalem to be returned to them. He even allocated funds from the Persian imperial treasury to finance the rebuilding of the temple. The Jews realized with a shock the profound truth God had used the wallet and the power of a foreign nation to revive his people. At the palace, the Persian ministers were concerned. "Your Majesty, if we let them go and allow them to rebuild their fortress, will they not rebel against us?" Cyrus smiled a smile full of the wisdom of a shepherd. "A person who is free to worship their God in peace will be the most loyal subject. When they pray in Jerusalem, they will pray for the prosperity of Persia. I do not need a garrisoned army to rule them. I need my righteousness to rule in their hearts." Whoa! This was the visionary statecraft of the Iranians, far ahead of its time. They turned potential enemies into strategic allies through tolerance instead of violence. Although the Cyrus cylinder bears the name of the Iranian king, for people of faith, every engraving on that clay block bears the fingerprint of God. The strange coincidence of timing exactly 70 years, as Jeremiah had prophesied, forced even the most skeptical to admit a supernatural power was at work. The first carts carrying the holy vessels began to assemble. A magnificent journey was about to begin. Iran had opened the cage doors, and the birds of freedom from Israel were preparing to take flight toward the south. The decree was issued. The gold and silver were ready. But the journey across 1,000 miles of desert back to Jerusalem would be far from simple. It was a journey history calls the Great Homecoming. As Cyrus's decree was proclaimed throughout every corner of Babylon, a new surge of life ignited amidst the ashes of despair. At the dawn of an early spring day in 538 BC, the gates of Babylon swung wide, not to welcome an invading army, but to see off a nation returning from the dead. The scene at the central square of Babylon was unbelievable. A massive caravan of over 42,000 Jews, along with thousands of servants and singers, was gathering their belongings. In the midst of the crowd were heavy carts carrying the 5,400 gold and silver vessels of the Temple of Jerusalem. The holy basins, cups, and plates that had been defiled by Belshazzar just nights before now shimmered under the Iranian sun, carefully wrapped in precious silk. What stunned the ancient world most was the presence of the Persian army. Elite Iranian cavalrymen, holding long spears with red cloaks fluttering in the desert wind, did not follow to guard slaves, but to escort them. Cyrus had commanded, "Whoever remains behind, let them help the returnees with silver, gold goods, and livestock." For the first time in history, the conqueror became the patron, using his own wealth and military power to protect the freedom of the weak. In that crowd were young Jews born and raised in Babylon. To them, Jerusalem was only a legendary name from the stories of their elders. They looked at the Iranian soldiers with eyes full of gratitude, but also bewilderment. Why is King Cyrus so good to us? The question echoed along the way. A Jewish elder leaning on a weathered wooden staff answered his children, "Because the heart of this Iranian king has been touched by God. He is using the power of Persia to prove that he never forgets a promise. Look at those soldiers. They are the arms of God protecting us as we cross the desert." Along the royal road, the ingenious highway system of the Persian Empire, the caravan moved west. The rest stations and wells dug in advance by the Persians made the grueling 4-month journey smoother than ever. As the caravan passed through the lands of the Edomites, Moabites, and Samaritans, The neighboring peoples stood frozen by the roadside. They saw the carts of gold and silver from the temple. They saw the seal of the Persian emperor on the administrative documents. They whispered in terror, "What is happening? Babylon has fallen, and now the Persians are rebuilding the nation for this minor people." The world's astonishment was a testament to the absolute sovereignty of God. He did not use a miracle like parting the Red Sea as in the time of Moses. He used the diplomacy and tolerance of a foreign nation to shake the entire Middle East. At the border of Judah, the Persian governor halted his horse and handed over the holy vessels to Zerubbabel, the Jewish leader. "Go and rebuild the house for your God," the Iranian official said, his voice full of respect. "Do not forget to pray for our King Cyrus. Show the world that under the shadow of Persia's wings, all nations may live in peace." Zerubbabel received the decree, tears streaming down his face. He understood that this was not just a political act. This was the pinnacle of the winning hearts strategy that God had placed into the hearts of the Iranians to change the course of history. As the Jewish people saw the mountains of Zion appear on the horizon after 70 years, the song "Hallelujah" finally rang out on the roads leading to Jerusalem, blending with the powerful thud of the hooves of their Iranian friends returning to the east. Jerusalem had appeared, but the task of reconstruction remained full of difficulties. And yet, looking back at this historical journey, we are truly amazed and wonder why God used a pagan nation to liberate his people. Could the choice of Iran be an eternal lesson about a God who has no borders? After many hardships and attacks from hostile tribes, the Temple of Jerusalem finally rose from the ashes. As the capstone was set into place, a thick cloud of frankincense, the precious spice sent from the valleys of Iran, began to drift into the air. The elders who had wept by the rivers of Babylon 70 years ago now wept once more. But this time, their tears fell upon the holy, clean stone floor of their homeland. They looked up at the bronze plaque engraved with the decree of the Persian kings hanging at the temple gate, an eternal testament to the protection of the Eastern Empire. Why did Iran, Persia, succeed so brilliantly in maintaining a vast empire while Babylon collapsed after a single night of feasting? The answer lies in the heart of the shepherd King Cyrus. Babylon made the mistake of believing that chains and forced assimilation would create submission. Conversely, Cyrus and his successors like Darius and Artaxerxes understood a profound truth of governance. A nation stripped of its faith will become a lifelong enemy, but a nation free to worship will become a fortress protecting the empire. Iran's winning hearts strategy turned Jerusalem into a loyal outpost in the west without needing a single soldier stationed there. The Jews of that time did not see the Persians as occupiers, but as protectors. In the prayers at the temple, the name of the Iranian king was always mentioned with a blessing, something that had never happened with any other empire in Israel's history. Looking back at the entire journey from the moment Isaiah wrote down the name Cyrus to the completion of the temple, a staggering theological point emerges. God is not limited by any religion or nation. His choice of Iran, a pagan nation, in the eyes of the Jews, is a powerful lesson in humility. He proved that he could use a king who worshipped the sacred fire to save those who worship the Lord. He used Persia's wallet to build his house. This shatters narrow human thinking, affirming that the sovereignty of the Most High covers all of humanity. He does not need a hypocrite who merely claims to be devout. He needs a righteous heart like Cyrus to execute mercy. The bond between the two nations did not end there. The Bible continues to record thrilling pages of history in the Iranian palace. Queen Esther used her beauty and courage to save her people from genocide right in the capital of Susa. The cupbearer Nehemiah received the absolute trust of the Persian king to return and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. It is fascinating to realize that it was precisely because of Iran's policy of tolerance that the lineage of King David was preserved through the darkest years of exile. Without Persia's protection, perhaps the lineage from which Jesus was later born would have vanished into the current of history. In that sense, Iran played the role of a gatekeeper for the plan of salvation for all mankind. Today, in the city of Hamadan, Iran, the tomb of Queen Esther and Mordecai still stands as a symbol of gratitude between two nations. The Cyrus cylinder in the British Museum remains the first declaration of human rights, reminding the world of tolerance. The story of God choosing Iran teaches us that light can come from the east, salvation can come from a stranger, and God always moves history in ways that far exceed human imagination. As the darkness of division still besieges the world, the lesson from the shepherd king of the Iranian highlands remains as relevant as ever. Kindness is the only universal language that can break all shackles. The journey from tears by the rivers of Babylon to joy in Jerusalem has concluded, but the truth of a God without borders will echo forever in the hearts of those who seek the truth. God does not look at religious labels or national borders. He looks at the heart ready to execute righteousness. He can use a stranger to help the family and use adversity to clear the way for revival. The deepest philosophy is this: do not limit His power within the small scope of human understanding. When you keep your faith and your kindness, God will move the whole world to protect you. If you feel the call of faith through these words, please leave a comment saying Amen to help spread His light. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to join our community where we learn together, keep the faith, and walk in God's guidance every day. Let the ship of your faith be steered steadily from today. May the peace and blessings of the Lord be with all of you.